Howdy doody. So in my video about the Phantom Troop on the Black Whale, I saw a few comments about people talking about a very interesting theory that I love. This theory is that Illumi is not Illumi and is in fact Hisoka in disguise. Before I begin, I want to say this is not my theory. I first heard about this a little less than a year ago in a video from New World Review. In that video, he goes on to say that a lot of the information he got was from a nice girl named Yuki. So a lot, but not all of the information I'm sharing, I first heard from them. But unfortunately, I'm not sure who the original creator of this theory is, so I don't know who to give credit to. But because some of my followers or others might not know about this theory, I want to go over it. The backbone of this theory is how and why Hisoka has chosen to pretend to be Illumi. The how is very simple. After Hisoka revived himself, if it hasn't been made clear yet, Post-mortem Nen gives a power increase to one's Nen abilities and also presumably their aura. With Hisoka's new and improved Nen abilities, he can mold any body part, or in this case, new shapes or looks to a body part. And then with Texture Surprise, he can make it look completely normal. So with these two things, Hisoka could easily make himself look like Illumi. And I think it's worth mentioning, there's people like Benelenov who can use their Nen abilities to completely change their appearance. So changing your appearance through Nen isn't something that's impossible or never heard of. As for the why, well, I think that can also be easily answered. When Hisoka says, "This time I've decided to make sure it's my opponents who can't decide who it is or where they'll have to fight." The who part of this is important because what did he mean by who? Wouldn't he just say the spiders don't get a choice when they fight me? But he said who, which makes me think he doesn't plan to face them directly. To me, this hints at him doing something like disguising himself as Illumi and joining the troop to slowly take them out. The next piece of useful information is according to the Hunter x Hunter guidebook, Hisoka is 187 centimeters tall and Illumi is 185. But in the manga, Chrollo and others do say Hisoka is 190 centimeters tall, but that doesn't really matter. Whether it's a 5 or 2 centimeter difference, Illumi and Hisoka are close enough to the same height that it wouldn't easily be noticed by anyone if they switched places. Now for another writing reason for why Hisoka would act as Illumi, there's a funny, almost ironic side to if Hisoka were to pretend to be Illumi. In the York New City arc, Kurapika captures Chrollo and is gonna meet with Pakunoda, but requires that all other spiders remain in one spot. Hisoka wants to get away because he doesn't want to lose a chance of fighting Chrollo. So he gets on the phone with Illumi, basically asking him to take his place. Later on, there's a sound outside from where Hisoka, Franklin, and Benelenov are. They go to investigate, but Kaluto appears and drops out of a window, distracting Franklin and Benelenov. So then a disguised Illumi can take Hisoka's place. And then when Hisoka confronts Chrollo and Kurapika, Kurapika is confused how he got away and Hisoka says he left his double behind. Wouldn't it be funny or ironic or just totally Hisoka that if Illumi had once pretended to be Hisoka to trick the Phantom Troop and others, wouldn't it just be totally something Hisoka would do to use essentially the same tactic again, especially after knowing it would work? Just something to consider. Now on to, I guess, supporting evidence. Now this isn't the most convincing thing ever, but definitely worth mentioning. Illumi all of a sudden has knee pads, and he's never once worn knee pads in all of his time in Hunter x Hunter. There has been a time where he was killing a group called the Dons, and Illumi had an outfit with wraps on the knees that the anime makes it seem like they could be maybe what Illumi has on now. However, in the manga, they're clearly different from what Illumi has on the Black Whale. They're also definitely not just Illumi's kneecaps because that's not how Togashi draws. So yes, these are definitely knee pads. But why is this relevant? Well, like I said, Illumi has never worn knee pads, whereas Hisoka has distinctively worn them on 2 big occasions. When he fought Gon, and when he fought Chrollo, both in Heaven's Arena. And this could very well be Togashi's subtle way of showing it's Hisoka. But within the story, this would just be Hisoka adding his own personal style to the outfit, because that is something he would do. But who knows, maybe Illumi just wanted to wear some knee pads. Now onto some of the more convincing evidence. This part can be a little confusing, but also not really. This part of the theory only goes for the Japanese text, because it doesn't carry over in the English translation. Now, I won't act like I know how the Japanese language works, but I will explain how it's been explained to me. In English, whenever you refer to yourself, you just say I, or sometimes you use me. However, in Japanese, they use pronouns to refer to themselves. The pronouns used can be different depending on the person or situation. Now, Hisoka has often used the pronoun boku. Now, to my understanding, boku is often used by younger boys or men and often shows that person to be playful, slightly childish, or immature. All things that fit Hisoka. Now, Illumi uses the pronoun ore. Ore can be seen as informal, or rude, or cocky, and often indicates aggressiveness and masculinity. All things that fit Illumi very well in my opinion. Now, the Illumi that's on the black whale is no longer using ore, but is now using boku. This is very odd for Illumi, because why would he suddenly change the pronouns he's using? And why would he use one like boku considering the immature and childish connotations it has? Now, the question is, has Illumi ever used boku before, or is this completely new? Well, for starters, I don't speak Japanese, and I don't have any real access to the Japanese text. However, I did find someone who had counted up all the times Illumi has used ore and boku. From what this person gathered, Illumi's used ore to refer to himself 23 times. All of these were before joining the Phantom Troupe, and according to the source I found, Illumi has only used boku 3 times. However, from their findings, plus another panel I have, I count a total of 5 times Illumi has used boku. The very first time Illumi uses boku was in a conversation with Hisoka the last time we see him before he joins the Phantom Troupe. The other 4 times were all on the black whale. So if I failed to get my point across, aside from his last interaction with Hisoka, Illumi has only used boku while on the black whale. So yes, the use of boku is extremely unusual. However, this isn't the only part of Illumi's speech that seems out of character. It's important to note that throughout all of Hunter x Hunter up to this point, Illumi has always been serious, blunt, straight to the point, and aggressive at times. But now, the Illumi on the black whale is speaking and acting very differently, and I would say a lot more like Hisoka. We get to a panel where Illumi is talking to the spiders on the black whale. Once again, 2 things Illumi says doesn't carry over perfectly in English. The first one is that Illumi says that him and Hisoka have a prenup where if he kills Hisoka, he gets paid. However, in Japanese, it's read as saying the hideout on Hisoka is an engagement ring, which is either a very interesting choice of wording from Illumi, or it's completely out of character, showing more reason to think it's Hisoka. For the second thing, in the Japanese version, Illumi uses konkai when talking about joining the spiders. Konkai translates to this time. Saying this time is odd because Illumi hasn't officially been part of the troupe, although you could argue he's talking about the time he was contracted by them. However, I don't see Illumi considering being contracted by them as being part of the group. And if this were actually Hisoka, it would make sense that either he let this phrase slip, or that he's almost taunting them by giving hints that it's not Illumi. Now onto some more stuff about Illumi's speech and behavior being abnormal. When Illumi and Kaluto are caught by 2 Zodiacs, the one Zodiac, Nana, tells them that they won't be arrested but will have to stay in the police station with them, to which Illumi requests a cell with a shower. Now this may be overthinking, but from what we've seen of Illumi, there's nothing really showing that he cares about cleanliness. For example, sleeping in the ground covered in dirt without a care in the world, whereas with Hisoka, we've seen him bathing on multiple occasions, that being in Heaven's Arena and Greed Island, showing that he cares a lot more than Illumi would about his overall cleanliness. And to get more into this scene, Illumi also voluntarily gives up information that the spiders are on the boat, which really doesn't make sense why he'd do this. It's unreasonable to me that Illumi would be scared of the Zodiac, so he gave up the info. And it's also unreasonable to me to think that he wants to throw the spiders under the bus so he can kill Hisoka himself. According to Illumi, as long as Hisoka dies, he'll get paid. There's just the extra fun of Illumi doing it himself. Also, he has nothing to gain by telling the Zodiac early access information, and if anything, he's made it harder for himself to find Hisoka. However, if this is Hisoka, this makes way more sense for a lot of reasons, but the most important being that this is something Hisoka would do just for fun to add more trouble for the spiders. Even Kaluto seems to be surprised by this, that he too is confused why Illumi is acting this way. Illumi says another thing that seems to be more fitting of Hisoka by saying, "Whoops, what can I say? I'm an honest person, so I end up answering anything I'm asked." This is not something Illumi would say. And he goes on to say he's not giving any more answers. He has a confidentiality agreement, which once again doesn't make any sense. Because if he cared about this confidentiality agreement, he wouldn't have said anything. And again, this is the childish, taunting, and messing around behavior of Hisoka, not Illumi. And while still on this scene, it's good to mention that Illumi somehow has a VIP ticket, and the spiders got on board by sneaking on. So it's weird that Illumi would have a ticket, and also weird that he never said anything about it to the spiders. Unless if you really want to hold on to the idea Illumi is just that determined to be the one to kill Hisoka. But after bringing up Kaluto, it's good to mention how he brings up a potential problem. Because he's Illumi's brother, shouldn't he know if Illumi is not Illumi, or even he's just acting weird? Well, there's 3 explanations for this. The first one is the least likely, but maybe Kaluto is being tricked like the rest of the spiders and has no idea anything's wrong. The second one is similar to the first, but has a little more going for it. Maybe despite being brothers, the lack of brotherly love are due to the age gap between them. Kaluto doesn't know Illumi well enough to notice anything's wrong. Or 3, Kaluto is either in on Hisoka's plan or knows something's up but doesn't care because his only reason to being in the troop is the vague reason of getting his brother back. Also, assuming Kaluto knows that Hisoka is pretending to be Illumi, I find it hard to believe that Kaluto would be loyal enough to the spiders to let them know if something was wrong. It seems like Kaluto has his own reasons for being part of the troop, unlike the others who view it more as a family of sorts. And if Hisoka took some time to plan this out, he could have very well gotten help from Illumi. This help could have been Illumi telling Kaluto to just go along with everything. But moving on a little bit. Using the bits and pieces of Illumi and Kaluto's interactions in this arc, I'm personally on the side of Kaluto knowing something's up and either is in on it or doesn't care for the most part. And that comes from this panel. As the spiders walk away, most walk away looking like whatever. However, first of all, Illumi is giving a look that to me, if you think it's Hisoka, is the look of him thinking that he's finally getting what he wants, the spiders in his own little playground. Then to his right is Kaluto, who seems to be looking at Illumi like something's wrong, which is part of why I think he knows something's up. But once again, he's either in on it or doesn't care. Finally, we have Machi, the only other spider looking at him. And in the past, it seemed that Hisoka and Machi have been pretty close to each other, so maybe Machi has realized something's wrong. Maybe she even knows that Illumi is Hisoka. And if she knew it was Hisoka, that wouldn't mess anything up. She states that she wants to be the one to kill Hisoka, so if she knew Illumi was him, then she'd keep it to herself until she has the chance to either be sure or the chance to take him out. And while on the subject of the art, I want to go over that even just the way Illumi is being drawn, the way he's expressing himself, is unusual. I even went through all of his appearances in Hunter x Hunter, and aside from the times with Hisoka and Killua, Illumi never breaks out of his blank expressions. And I think we can all agree that Illumi's interactions with Hisoka and Killua are very different from everyone else. Literally, any other time we see Illumi, he has the same blank, expressionless face. And just about the only times Illumi's expression changes is when it involves Killua or Hisoka, or both. But what my point is that ever since Illumi has gotten on the Black Whale, I don't think he's acted or even looked himself. Finally, one last good piece of evidence comes from the cover of volume 36, where we see all current members of the Phantom Troop with 3 flowers. 2 of these flowers are theorized to represent the deaths of Shalnark and Kortopi, with the third having no concrete identity. However, it's theorized that when Hisoka came to take the number 4 spot in the spiders, he killed whoever whoever previously held that number. Now, in the middle of the troop is Illumi, who's also holding a flower. The flower signifies his connection to the deaths that the other 3 flowers represent. However, there are other interpretations of the flower's meaning. The other most likely explanation being that the flowers represent who Hisoka will kill in the future, with that possibly meaning Finks, Kabuto, and Shizuku. But it could also be Phaeton or Chrollo or Franklin. It all just depends on who you think the flower is closest to, assuming it represents who Hisoka will kill. Also, I'm sure someone's thought of this before, but I have another explanation for the possible meaning behind the flowers. Let's say that the flowers are connected to Shizuku, Finks, and due to them being in a triangle, I think this also includes all 3 of Chrollo, Kabuto, and Phaeton. So what if all those people are safe? Because it does seem possible that Nobunaga, Benolenov, Machi, and Franklin could all eventually end up getting killed. But moving on, when Illumi explains his reason to be in the troop, it's essentially just a fun side game for Hisoka and him to play while he's hunting the troop. So Illumi isn't very important, but in this art, he's placed in the middle, which doesn't take a genius to know that when something is placed in the middle, it often has great importance. So why is Illumi shown to have such importance when if it's really just Illumi, he's just there for his own weird Hisoka reasons? Well, I have an answer for that. If Illumi is actually Hisoka, that's why he's shown in a place of importance. That the one the troop is looking for is right in front of him. Also, besides for Phaeton and Benolenov, who have facial coverings, Illumi is the only one drawn without a mouth. People have different reasons for why this is, but what I think the best explanation is that Illumi is the only one lying, the only one whose motives aren't clear to the rest of the group, that he's hiding something. And right after the volume cover, we get a page where at the top is a pair of lips and a message that says, "Spoilers, I dare say." Then right below is an author's note, with the author's note not being super important and being pretty basic, just going over Togashi's career. The question is, what are the possible meanings behind the pair of lips and the message about the spoilers? And my answer would be those lips represent Illumi's missing ones. That the spoilers is the foreshadowing that Illumi is shown to be the one the spiders are looking for. That Illumi is connected by the flowers to past or future deaths of the troop. That Illumi is Hisoka. Now, I finally finished all I know about this theory. Togashi has done everything a writer needs to do in order to foreshadow something without giving it away too easily. He's given an explanation of how Hisoka could be Illumi, why he'd choose to hide this way. He's changed Illumi's speech, actions, and design to some extent. He's used art in chapters along with the volume 36 cover to imply something about Illumi is wrong, or there's something to notice about him. And using the volume cover as evidence of foreshadowing isn't crazy because Togashi has done this before. On the volume 30 cover, we get all of the Zodiacs facing away, with only 2 of them that have their hands behind their back. Those people being Pariston and Sayu. They both ended up betraying the Hunter Association and sided with Beyond Netero. The details aren't important, but the point is, Togashi showed who would betray the Zodiacs before it happened through the volume cover. So it's possible that something similar is happening with the volume 36 cover. So that's all I got for you. If my opinion matters, I'm personally a believer in this theory. But we'll just have to see what Togashi ends up doing. And I have hope that soon we'll get an answer to whether this theory is true or not. And while talking about Togashi, I've had people comment asking if or when new chapters are being released. If you didn't know, Togashi has come back to writing, and to my knowledge, he's working on 10 new chapters. And he said that once all 10 are complete, they will begin getting released weekly. As far as I know, he's completed 3 or 4 chapters, but I have no idea what kind of time frame we're looking at. But like I said, that's all I've got, so feel free to discuss, complain, and argue in the comments. But if you argue, just keep it somewhat civil, alright?